ladies and gentlemen. We are glad that you could make the time. In fact, you made a concerted effort to make this time to be here today. I believe it is because you know the importance, the significance of what we would be discussing this evening, the intentions that we have. But today we are gathered here under the auspices of Secular India Movement to talk on our Federal Republic challenges and responsibilities. And we have with us a person who we could probably not have got a better person for speaking on the topic today. We are quite privileged to have amongst us Ms. Teesta Setalvad. Thank you, ma'am, for being here. And we are beginning the program for the evening. To commence the program, may I invite the dignitaries onto the dais. Dr. K. Radhakrishnan Nair, General Convener, Secular India Movement. Please, sir. Advocate P. Chandrasekhar, Chairman of the Secular India Movement. So please be seated on the dais. Mrs. Teesta Setalvad, the guest of the evening. Ma'am, we welcome you onto the stage. Advocate Johnson P. John, Secretary, Secular India Movement. Okay. So without further delay, Sir Johnson, sir. If you have read the tagline under Secular India Movement, you would read, "In defense of the Indian Constitution." Should it not make you think as to why, or if at all, there is a need for defending the Indian Constitution? A little bit of thought would certainly take you the way to believe and understand that we live in times where we must certainly consider that our Constitution may need a little bit of defending to do. So this evening, as we discuss on Federal Republic, which we believe ourselves to be, Professor Shankaran, sir? Please, sir. Please. Thank you, sir. So today, as we move forward without taking up much time, may I now invite Dr. K. Radhakrishnan Nair to please render the welcome speech.
Good evening, everybody. We are very happy to address this evening because there is a fear in the mind of everybody. We have assembled here after smelling a very threat of our Constitution, as well as fundamental aspects of many constitutional values. This is the high time to see that our constitutional values are preserved without any aberrations or any spoilage. It is a task. Setalvad is with us. A person who has suffered for the entire humanity of this country as well as the world. She is a person who cannot tolerate the injustice to the human being, whoever be the rulers. We, the ruled, we have to stay in the country without any danger, without any fear. We must have freedom. We must have justice. We must have peace, truth, everything. We are following the Gandhian principles. My dear friends, as well as respected citizens of this country, this is a time we have to unite. We are not against anybody in the world. We want to keep the principles of justice, freedom, dignity of the individual, as well as the unity of our nation. ഭാരതത്തിൻ്റെ അഖണ്ഡത എന്തു വില കൊടുത്തും സംരക്ഷിക്കേണ്ട ചുമതല നമുക്കുണ്ട്. We have to preserve our unity. At the same time, we want to see that every citizen is living in this India without having any sense of fear. I don't want to elaborate anything. You are very, very aware of the situation now prevailing in India. Our responsibility is to see that others are at check, others are at balance the situations. The check and balance enshrined in our constitution. Everybody is talking about high values of our constitution, but at the same time, they are not having any attempt to preserve that. So this is the high time that every citizen of India should ensure that our constitution is preserved intact. I don't want to elaborate further. We are having our President, Mr. Chandrasekhar, the very senior most advocate of this High Court, and also a person, a champion of preserving the liberty as well as human rights of the citizens. Mr. Professor Shankaran, a Gandhian, true Gandhian. He is not a pseudo Gandhian, he is a true Gandhian. And we are having Mr. Johnson, a man for the last 3 decades working in the society without expecting anything, only the betterment of the society. So we have to encourage those like people. In one word, I welcome all of you, and also our Chandrasekharan, our main speaker, our Setalvad. Setalvad, you may be knowing that he is the granddaughter of a very, very, very renowned MC Setalvad. We do remember Mr. MC Setalvad. We have to say something about MC Setalvad. He was asked whether are you ready to accept Chief Justice of India. He said that I am 61. I will not accept. I will not accept because I am 61. The second time when he was 65, again he was asked to take the Chief Justiceship. So that no, I cannot. How? Can we see the persons like this? We cannot see. Now people are, I usually refer that pleonexia is a very, very lethal disease to gather for our wife, son and relatives. Pleonexia is a Latin term gathering everything for ourselves. We want persons like this. So anyway, I conclude. I sincerely welcome all these dignitaries on the dais and off the dais, because without you people, the function is meaningless. There are so many, all the persons are highly dignified persons. We know that. I am unable to name each one of you. Anyway, I welcome all of you, sirs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I now invite Advocate P. Chandrasekhar, Chairman of Secular India Movement, for rendering the presidential address. Please, sir.
Madam Teesta Setalvad, other dignitaries on the dais, and my dear friends, a very good evening to you all. I am not going to give a very elaborate speech because I know that you are very anxious to hear Teesta. And I am grateful to her to come here because she is not keeping good health. In spite of that, when I called her, she readily agreed. And after we booked the ticket once, she was fully down with fever. Then she was very apologetic. And she told me, I don't know what to do, what to tell you, because I am not able to come. But then we thought we will have it on another day. And that's how she has come today. And we are very much grateful to her. And I could see the anxiety she was expressing to address you all, to see you all, especially the bar of Kerala High Court, who are very much engrossed in fighting for human rights and civil liberties. Now, before I conclude few words, and about this hall first, MKD Hall, we all remember MK Damodaran, whose photo is hanging on the wall. He himself was a crusader of human rights. And I had the privilege to associate with him in an organization which is called Jagrada, which is purely for fighting for human rights in Kerala. And he used to tell me, everybody say I am a communist, but I am not. I am a human rights activist. Anyhow, that's another story. And there is no reason to elaborate on it, especially tonight, where you are eager to hear Teesta. And there is another reason, because she has to go back to Mumbai in the flight at 9 o'clock. So we should be concluding this session very fast. So it's not proper for me to take so much of time of yours and stand between you and Teesta. Oh, two things, and I think she will be speaking on the 3 laws which is now in place, criminal laws, which has been given Hindi names. Now we are not very much concerned with the Hindi formulation, but the manner it has been done. And Nasser had a agitational program in front of the chamber complex, and we had also discussed this matter in front of the chamber complex a few months ago. Now, 2 things stands out, to be quick. One is Hindi, Hindu, and one-party rule, which is embedded throughout the 3 enactments. Second is that a sort of dictatorship which is enrooted through a false democratic process. I think she will speak about that also. The third aspect is that though the propaganda is that we are replacing a colonial rule with an indigenous one, anybody who will be reading the 3 acts will immediately come to know that it is not so. In fact, it is enactments which in fact enforces the colonial rule. Not only enforces colonial rule, it is all pervading throughout the enactments that we are embracing a sort of imperialism. And with these few words, I hand over my mic to Teesta. Now stage is hers.
Very, very good evening, friends from the Kerala Ernakulam Bar, the Secular India Movement, eminent advocates, academics, and all of you, particularly Dr. Radhakrishnan, Advocate P. Chandrasekhar, Mr. Ahmed Kabir, Mr. T. Krishnanurmi, Mr. K.P. Shankaran, Advocate Johnson John, and Ms. Tanuja George, the advocate. Thank you so much for having me here. And I'll speak a little softly because of my voice, but I will speak at length. Friends, we are here meeting at a very critical juncture in India's history. We have just concluded the parliamentary elections, 18th Lok Sabha elections. And it appears to us that we've been given a breather. It's not a completely satisfactory result, but some breather we have got. So I will be talking about that as well towards the end, particularly this report that was brought out by an all-India group called Vote for Democracy, guided by 3 experts, Mr. Devasaham, who's a former IAS officer, Professor Harish Karnik, who's a former alumni of Kanpur IIT, and Dr. Pyarelal Garg, who's the former Dean of Medical Sciences, Punjab University. These are the 3 experts that guided the report, and a whole team of us put it together. And it basically deals with the institutional collapse of the Election Commission of India. And I urge this esteemed group to also look at this issue, which is a very critical issue. We tend to ignore the Election Commission after elections are over. And I think it's very important that we keep the Election Commission in focus, because what Chandrasekhar sir referred to as to the kind of decade that India has gone through under this regime, which has been called an autocratizing democracy, which has been called where all our fundamental freedoms, including human indicators, have dropped. And yet we are told constantly that we are going towards Viksit Bharat, and we are constantly told that we are going to be the 3rd largest economy. Economics is not my subject, but I will say this, that when you start measuring GDP, not as per capita GDP, but as GDP per se, you might be the 3rd largest economy like we have been since 2011, but you're also 127 on the per capita index, with Sri Lanka, Bhutan, and Maldives in South Asia higher than us. So I think it's a matter of shame, the data manipulation that this government does. And I think one of the most important things that we have to understand about democracy and about constitutional democracy, we gave ourselves this constitution, and I'd like to congratulate all the members, thank you so much, all the members of the Constituent Assembly that sat for 18 months. I think we had 277 or 312 sessions of the Constituent Assembly between 1946 and 1950. We had elaborate discussions on every article and every section of the law. Let's also remember that India went through an upheaval at that time, caused largely by the British, but also caused by sectarian forces like the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, Hindu Mahasabha, and the Muslim League, that pushed this country towards partition. Despite all that bloodshed, despite all that social turmoil, I think I've always, as a student of the law, I salute both the pragmatism and the principle of our founding mothers and fathers, who stuck to keeping India as a constitutional republic. We did not become a theocratic state, even though one was created across the border. And I think it is that history we need to remember, because I'm talking to members of the bar here, many members of the bar here, and lawyers. I'd like to mention that one of the things that one of our best judges who came from the state, from the Supreme Court, Justice Krishna, had kept on saying in so many of his judgments was that why are we not implementing Article 13 and Article 74, which is why are we not constitutionalizing all our laws. And I'd like to put a few words of caution before we get to the last 10 years, 11 years, and ask a question, that were we a perfect democracy till 2014? Had our institutions become robust and strong, whether it is the Election Commission, Supreme Court, institutions of education, executive, judiciary. And I'd like to suggest that we were a democracy in evolution, in the making. Because we had the Constitution as an ideal towards which we had to aspire, towards which we had to amend our laws, which we did not do all of them. But we still were not a completely autocratic setup like we have been in the last 10 years. We had that huge glitch of the emergency. We cannot ignore that. There were unfair detentions, there was torture, there was the habeas corpus issue. It was very serious, we can't deny that. But let's also not forget that the same dispensation that called the emergency, within 15 months, called the election in 1977. I was 16 at that time. And I remember my parents telling me, my grandfather had passed away, but I remember attending one meeting at KC College Hall in Mumbai when that infamous judgment was passed in the Supreme Court. And what a galaxy of speakers. There was Hidayatullah, there was K.T. Shah, there was Palkhiwala, there was Setalvad, there was Daftari, all of them speaking. And they brought out a book talking about how Constitution is supreme and not Parliament. It was just a tiny publication. But in 77, when the elections were declared, and my parents told me, forget about your 10th standard exams, go and campaign and ensure that democracy is retained. And we campaigned all over Mumbai, Bombay then. But what I recall so clearly, particularly when I look at now, is that nobody had a doubt about whether the Election Commission would be free or fair. Even after the emergency, even after the erosion of certain values, the Election Commission remained free and fair in 1977. I'd like to suggest today that by the brazen overturning of the May 2023 verdict of a 5-judge bench of the Supreme Court, led by Justice K.M. Joseph from the state, this government has made the Election Commission supine. And the manner in which the Election Commission was appointed, we know the people who were chosen. We know the kind of people who were handpicked. And I will come to that in a bit. But I'd like to say that even for the 65 years before this dispensation came to power, there had been challenges. There had been challenges to retain the spirit of federalism. Kerala has experienced it when the government was overturned. There have been other challenges of trying to navigate this constitutional dream of trying to make social, economic, and political justice and equality a reality for all Indians. But there was never such a brazen disregard of the Constitution as we see now. And I'd like to just touch upon how this whole construct of Hindutva supremacism, quote nationalism, has been used to manipulate and pervert even the law, and to weaponize the law, and to misuse the law. Abrogation of Article 370 without any attention to Article 2.3 that requires consent from the Jammu and Kashmir Assembly. Look at the issue of financial autonomy of states. Kerala has raised its voice, Tamil Nadu has raised its voice, Karnataka has raised its voice. The decision of the state center to borrow for the state's finance. The manner in which there was an attempt to pass the land ordinance in 2014. There was a huge uproar in parliament. The opposition, even though it was a small opposition at that time. So what did this government do? In the BJP-ruled states like Maharashtra, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, they repealed the law that was brought in by the UPA 2 government, which allowed for social audit and compensation for land acquisition, which had in turn repealed a 150-year-old colonial law. So this government that talks about decolonizing criminal law, in fact, has overturned all the rights-based legislation that was passed in the decade before it came to power. Right to information has been diluted. Right to education is not implemented properly. Right to food, which is now guaranteed to us after 2013, is made to appear as if it's a charity of the government and all the schemes that is doing, La Bharti and all the rest of it. So in every sense, this government is attacking the Constitution by bringing in laws that are anti-constitutional, repealing those laws that had moved us towards the constitutional vision after long, long decades. And I'd just like to point out what happened during the COVID pandemic. A very difficult period for the country. I believe that Kerala, Maharashtra handled it better than other states. But what was the reaction of this government? By declaring this kind of lockdown, which put so many of our migrant workers into such a tragedy and crisis, instead of that, if they had adhered to the spirit of the Constitution, the federal spirit of the Constitution, they should have set up an interstate council with chief ministers, chief secretaries, deputy chief ministers, health secretaries, experts, and taken decisions consultatively. Because India is a vast and diverse country with different needs in different states. But instead of that, you have this narcissistic leader who just declared one day, like he did demonetization, he declared a lockdown. And it caused supreme hardship. It was mentioned earlier, the dangers of this Hindi Hindustan and what it means, not just for federalism, but for diversity and for the cultural rights and the linguistic rights that are embedded in our Constitution. Hindi, they are trying to foist as the only official language, whereas there are 22 recognized languages under the Constitution. In fact, there could be more, arguably, but there are 22. So in every possible way, this regime has attacked the constitutional base of this country, the Republican base of this country, through bulldozers in parliament and physical bulldozers against religious minorities, like we saw in Udaipur day before yesterday. Weaponization of the law, the use of a brute majority in parliament without discussion, without any debate, without any understanding of the huge diversity of this country. The parliament was used to destroy the Constitution brick by brick. We've seen this in other countries which have had fascist and Nazi governments that have used electoral majorities in a majoritarian way. That is why I say 4th of June 2024 thanks to the resilience of the Indian people, that gave courage to an opposition to fight. Because I believe it happened both ways. I believe that the sheer desire of the people to ensure that jobs, economic distress, farmers' distress, agrarian distress, workers' distress, human life conditions should be the core to the election, not hate speech. It was that ensured that the opposition got courage to actually fight the election with the constitution in their hand. The point is that the constitution has always been our symbol and our motto for human rights defenders. PUCL, Secular India Democracy. It is a constitution through which we act and through which we aspire. But to hear the constitution in a political language of the political opposition was very, very welcome. And I think it was the people who pushed the opposition to ensure this. But let's not forget how the farmers' bills were passed. Let's not forget how so many laws were passed to undermine the Forest Rights Act. There were 3 bills that were passed: the Mining Act, the Highways Act, the Waterways Act, were all passed to dilute the impact of the 2006 Forest Rights Act. So my point being that this government has used the law and parliament to actually undermine what constitutional gains we had made over 65 years. The South is crucial, the East is crucial, the center is crucial, but you have a politics that is only catering to large sections of the northern belt and some sections of the western belt. We know that the union list has 97 subjects, the state list has 66 subjects, the concurrent list has 47 subjects. But how come then, and I'll come to that, you can pass the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita without any consultation with the states? Forget any consultation in parliament. I'd like all the esteemed lawyers to guide us that now that the opposition is in better numbers, is it at all possible for them to bring it back to parliament? Laws that have been passed when 146 MPs were suspended were passed in a few hours. And laws that are fundamentally, and I've got a detailed exposition on those laws, I'm sure all of you already are experts on this, but I would argue that 85 to 87% of the laws have not been changed. Only numbers have been changed to create more confusion for the next 15 years, so that by the time we understand what 302 is, 124A has now become 152, sedition plus, gender violence has become this, counter-terror laws are brought inside the law, section 111 to 119. So it will take a long while for the courts and lawyers and judges to navigate even the sections of the law. And the rest of the changes on 12 counts are very, very dangerous. I'll come to that also in a minute. There have been very interesting moments that the last 10 years have seen before the election. One has been the moment when before the farmers' agitation, when the CAA 2019 was passed. And I know that even in Kerala, but certainly in Delhi, Shaheen Bagh, Calcutta, Mumbai, West Bengal, all over the country, there were extremely robust agitations taking place. And what fascinated me as a human rights defender about those agitations is to see the minority, to see young people from the minority, to see women from the minority not come forward for religious demands, but for a citizenship, secular, constitutional demand. And I'd also like to say here that the young leadership of the minority that emerged at that time, particularly in Delhi, has been made to suffer for it. The reprisal of the state, the reprisal of the machinery, using the excuse of the 2020 Delhi violence, ignoring the egregious hate speeches made by Kapil Mishra, Anurag Thakur, Ragini, and other people who belong to the ruling dispensation, who provoked violence. We have at least 8 or 9 young leaders still incarcerated 4 to 5 years down. Sir was asking me about Umar Khalid this morning. And I said, it is terrible. Umar Khalid has been made to suffer, just like Gulfishan Fatima has been made to suffer. Miran Haider has been made to suffer. And therefore, I'd like to appeal to this gathering and to appeal to those, all of us who are concerned with human rights, that let's never forget our political prisoners. Let's never forget the condition of our jails, the rights of prisoners in jail. And in all the work that we do, we must ensure that we write letters and keep the enthusiasm and the spirits of political prisoners up. You know, the very strange thing about a bad law, an anti-constitutional law, and I say this with some responsibility because I'm standing in Kerala, is that once a bad law comes, even a government from a party that has opposed that law in parliament, like this government here, the LDF government, misuses such laws. So state power is a very, very strange thing. And it's a frightening thing. That once draconian, anti-constitutional laws come onto our statute books, they don't go away easily. They don't get repealed easily. And hence I appeal to all of you never to stop making demands for a repeal of UAPA, repeal of CAA 2019, and a repeal of 30 other laws that we have listed in a common manifesto that my organization, CJP, and PUCL Maharashtra has brought out, where we have listed all the problematic laws that need to be repealed. And now that we have an energized opposition, we cannot let them rest. We need to ask them to take up these questions, because if they fought the election on the slogan of Save the Constitution, then they must save us from laws which are anti-constitutional. And I feel this must be part of our people's campaign. Friends, I'm aware that in Kerala, there were lots and lots of demonstrations for Manipur, for what happened in that state. And I'd just like to flag that as one of the most bitter examples of what it means to have a government, a double-engine government, if you like, which becomes more and more accountable because it is in power both at the state and the center. We've seen that of Gujarat, we've seen that of UP. I don't know if you're aware, but in Uttar Pradesh, over 267, around that figure, very, very ordinary protesters, and some people who were not even at the protest at the time of CAA 2019, have had their properties attached by the Adityanath government. And they're running from pillar to post, impoverished, trying to do legal fees, etc. Coming to Manipur. And it was UP, and then Madhya Pradesh under Shivraj Chauhan, and now Rajasthan under the BJP, that has started to use the bulldozer as a quick form of draconian justice. Coming back to human rights freedoms in Manipur, apart from the fact that we still have people living in relief camps in pathetic conditions, and they've had one very, very brutal winter there. Food is barricaded, they don't get access to food and medicines easily. Apart from that, I don't know if you know, India tops the international list on internet shutdowns. We are 6th in the world. Now, I'd like to ask a question to you. Do you even consider it a human rights violation? I think it's a human rights violation. If the state decides to simply unilaterally shut down internet so that our community, because internet has been interpreted by the higher judiciary as part of Article 221, which is the right to life itself, because you have the right to access and freedom of expression and the right to knowledge. And in the last 14 or 15 months, and even before that, after Kashmir, Manipur was the worst affected when it came to internet shutdowns. You know what it means when the entire state has internet shutdowns, or 5 districts have internet shutdowns? If Kerala has it or Maharashtra has it, we would be protesting. Because we are so dependent on our phone and the internet. But believe me, India is the 6th worst offender when it comes to internet shutdowns. And despite the fact that Anuradha Bhasin, my dear friend journalist from Kashmir, went to the Supreme Court, she got a minor relief from the Supreme Court, who said, yeah, you should get it ratified by a court, etc. But not a fundamental prayer that she asked for, which is to declare such internet shutdowns as unconstitutional. So we have a long, long way to go in terms of our legal battles, in terms of our constitutional battles, in terms of actually making the Constitution a real life document for the people of this country. Since there are so many things to talk about, I will now, after this, my opening remarks, now restrict myself to the criminal laws and then to the recently conducted elections. I'd like to argue that any government that makes such big, large changes in the criminal laws does so to present its vision of justice. It presents its vision of justice through that legislation. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of the new criminal laws, the context, overall context, and the process that was followed for the passage of these laws. What was the context? The context was, we just decided one fine day to set up a very secretive committee, which we got to know of because it published a notice saying that lawyers should send their responses. And this is during the COVID lockdown period, 2020. There was the Vice Chancellor of National Law University, Delhi, the registrar, and 5 other members, and 2 law officers who are very close, vocal part of the central government were also special invitees. There is no information on how many sittings this committee conducted. There is no information available about how it responded to at least 7,000 different suggestions that came in from groups of lawyers all over the country. I know in Maharashtra itself there were about 100 such sent. Basically, it was in a secretive manner, not in a constitutional manner, not in a transparent manner. Normally, what have we been doing? What does a government do when it wants a seminal shift in the law? It goes to the Law Commission. It refers questions to the Law Commission. But you don't want to refer it to the Law Commission, an institution that was created and exists, that has submitted, I think, over 477 reports. I remember the first Law Commission happened to be headed by my grandfather, and in which they were very clear institutional recommendations made which are still not implemented. That is what we do with commission reports in this country. But the Law Commission was the way to go. Instead of that, they chose the route of this committee. And after that, suddenly in August 2023, they tabled the bills. That's when the bills became available. They tabled the bills, and then there was a lot of discussion, a lot of media reports, a lot of reactions. And in December 2023, when 146 members of parliament were suspended in an undemocratic way, in the absence of these opposition members, these bills were passed, which itself, according to me, could be grounds for getting them back, which is the question I'm raising before these esteemed legal minds over here. That can there not be an argument made that these need to be reviewed by the same parliament? Then look at the names. The name is very interesting. Earlier we had the CRPC, we had the Indian Penal Code, and we had the Indian Evidence Act. Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita, Bharatiya Suraksha Samhita, Bharatiya Sakshya Adhiniyam. It has been argued by scholars that these are extremely problematic names because the liberal definition of Samhita is a collection. It can also be argued that these are derivatives from the Veda because even the Manusmriti is a Samhita. So from the name itself, what you're doing is you're showing the country, it's a mini small step towards saying that these are laws that we are moving slowly towards a theocratic state. That is the opinion of many scholars, and I tend to agree with them. I mentioned earlier that when any dispensation brings in such seminal laws, it presents its vision of justice. So the question I'd like to ask is, and I said that until 2014 we were not a perfect democracy, we were a democracy in the making, in the evolution, etc. That the evolution of any democracy is the movement from being a supplicant, subject, to a citizen, vis-a-vis the state. In my view, these laws take you right back to being even more a supplicant than we were before. Why am I saying even more? Because we know that there's no decolonization about it. That's a load of hyperbole, because in 1973 the entire CRPC was amended. But many sections were retained, which are problematic from the human rights point of view. And that is why I'm saying that in the making, have those sections been retained? Yes. Have those sections been made more draconian? Yes. So there's nothing decolonizing about these laws. In fact, it grants more powers to the police and takes away crucial powers even from the local magistracy. Another very interesting point, like I said earlier that 17, some say 25% of the laws are the same. There's only renumbering. It's a cut-paste job, there's renumbering. But the important thing is, if you look at the 12 major ways in which these are problematic, arbitrary power to label non-violent democratic action as terrorism. This is very, very important because it's attacking our right under Article 14 and 19 and 21 to legitimately, silently, non-violently protest. And sections of the UAPA which existed in the UAPA have been brought in, clause 111 to 119, like I said, of the BNS. I don't want to go into all details here, but please look at these sections and the definitions of disturbance of public order, destabilizes or destroys the political, economic, or social structures of the country, etc. Very, very loose definitions, very, very broad definitions, which are very, very dangerous. Now let's go to the Constitution for a minute. The Constitution of India, Article 38, under Chapter 4, Directive Principles of State Policy, calls on the state to secure a social order for the promotion of the welfare of the people, in which justice, social, economic, and political shall inform all institutions of national life. The Constitution, in fact, commands the state to strive to minimize inequalities of income, endeavor to eliminate inequalities in status, facilities, and opportunities. These changes cannot be done without non-violently challenging our existing social structures, which means you will have movements, you will have protests against structures which are inherently against Article 38. Now, under the BNS, that could be labeled an act of terrorism. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar or Narayan Guruji, they call for a casteless society. Itself could be problematic. Because if you believe and the regime believes in a structure that exists, and any challenge to that structure being problematic, then this challenge can also be problematic. Stepping back 20 years ago, Gujarat 2002 happened. There was a lot of misuse of POTA, the Prevention of Terrorism Act at that time. Before that, we had TADA, which was there for 10 years. Then we had POTA, which was common minimum program of the UPA government before it came to power was that it will repeal POTA. When it came to power and NDA was defeated, the India Shining campaign was defeated, it did repeal POTA, but unfortunately it brought in UAPA. That is what I'm trying to please emphasize, that unfortunately governments, regardless of their ideological views, once they are in power, look at laws and the Constitution differently. And we need to be very, very vigilant as citizens, regardless of the color of the dispensation. At that time, in 2004 and 2008, I was in Parliament, I was an observer. And I saw the CPM and CPI as the only opposition that opposed the enactment of UAP. And that's why I referred to the fact that then when you see a left government in this state misusing UAP, what does it tell us? What does it tell us about state? What does it tell about power? What does it tell us about the Constitution? These are the dichotomies and anomalies that we cannot run away from. We cannot highlight one and not speak about the other. Now, the very new and open-ended provisions of terrorism which have been brought from UAPA, a permanent counter-terror law, and brought into BNS 2023. Now, those targeted protesters, dissenters, academics, writers, we've seen all of that. They could now be prosecuted under both laws, making bail even more difficult, making the entire effort more complicated. I'm sure as lawyers you were closely following the Supreme Court arguments on sedition and the repeal of 124A before these laws were brought in. And this government kept telling the Supreme Court, including through an affidavit of the Prime Minister in May 2023, that we believe that sedition has no place in modern law and it should go. In BNS, I urge you to look at Clause 150 and Clause 152, which has been termed by many of us as sedition plus. Very, very vague definitions, acts endangering sovereignty, unity, and integrity of India. And by putting it here, creation of excitement among people, exciting people in support of quote-unquote prohibited activities. The definitions are so broad and so loose that they can easily be misused against the farmers, against the anti-CA activists, against any mass protest that comes up tomorrow. Thirdly, I don't think Kerala has it, but Karnataka, Maharashtra, Chhattisgarh, Jammu and Kashmir, UP already have in place Gujarat, very draconian, what they call organized crime and preventive detention laws. NSA, Makoka, Gujarat is called Gundas Act, Chhattisgarh is called Public Security Act. Now, those laws already exist. Now you have UAPA, which is now already existing. And now you have BNS, which has brought into the normal criminal law these sections which are counter-terror sections. So as criminal lawyers, please understand what that will mean. It means just arming the police machinery and the state to act undemocratically against its citizens. I don't know if you know, but fasting, Bhook Hartal, is also being criminalized under the BNS. So every other day people go on fast. An icon for all of us, Sharmila Irom, she was on hunger fast against the AFSPA in Manipur for 18 years, I think, 14 years or 18 years. Every time her health was serious, she would be taken to the hospital by the authorities. Now, in case you do that, Clause 224 says that attempt to commit suicide to compel or restrain exercise of loyal power. Whoever attempts to commit suicide with the intent to compel or restrain any public servant from discharging his official duty shall be punished with simple imprisonment for a term which may extend to 1 year. That is your BNS. What is decolonizing about all of this? Mahatma Gandhi, all our freedom fighters, Maulana Azad, all of them went on fast as a tool of political protest. And it is a very powerful, non-violent tool of protest, just like Satyagraha is. All of that will be criminalized and has been criminalized under the BNS. The fifth attack on our democratic strides is a strong signaling by BNS CRPC to the police that force may be used against assemblies of people. At the moment, there is an attempt to say that don't use force unless strictly necessary. Unless the executive magistrate orders it, you should not use force against an assembly, etc. Even that is misused. Now, look at clause 130 of the CRPC, section 130, gives power to the executive magistrate who can step in if he feels and an order needs to be taken from him or before force is used. Now look at clause 149 of BNSS. Magistrate or any other executive magistrate authorized by him who is present, whether he is of the highest rank or not, may cause it to be dispersed by armed forces. So very clever wording changes, which means that you're taking away any minor protection there was under the CRPC for protest. How has the Sangh Parivar been shielded? Consciously shielded under these laws. As lawyers, you will know that after many, many years of efforts by activists like us, 153 AA was attempted to be brought in, and 144A of the CRPC was attempted to be brought in. What is this? What are these sections? These, these sections are to regulate processions who are carrying weapons during the procession, because you saw the phenomenon of Bajrang Dal and VHP, etc. It's another matter that the Law Commission recommended, the Parliament passed it, but it has not been notified. It has not been notified for the longest time. However, now that has been dropped completely. But an equally basic way that the Sangh Parivar has been shielded is, while there are many, many definitions under the criminal law, new criminal law, on what constitutes an offense against the state, I mentioned some of them earlier, attack on the constitutional structure is not an offense, which it is under UAPA, it is under other sections. So obviously attack on the constitution does not matter to this dispensation. Powers of the police in clause 172 have been increased. Handcuffs have been brought back. Handcuffs have been brought back. They were removed only after several judgments of the Supreme Court. Police custody has been maximized. Earlier it was limited to about 15 days. Often it was only less. But now the phrasing of it, the section there is such that you can actually extend it to as much as 40 days in some cases. All very dangerous for human rights. Biometrics can be forcibly taken. Your fingerprints, your retina, all sorts of biometrics can be taken. Not just if you're an accused, but if you have anything, the police decide you have anything to do with the case. They can take biometrics of any citizen, which is a complete violation of your right to life and your right to privacy and other rights under the Constitution. The pain of imprisonment, and ask me that, has also been compounded. If you are incarcerated now under BNS section, statutory bail will only be available automatically if you are a first-time offender. So for many rights activists who have many, many cases against them, which are malicious cases, statutory bail is now being denied. 3 states in the country, Kerala, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, have said that they will exercise their constitutional rights because law and order is a state subject, and they will amend the BNS. Many people have gone to Supreme Court challenging it. It will be very, very interesting to see, very, very interesting to see whether all the egregious sections are removed by the states who are in the opposition. I'm stressing this because with due humility and due respect, and we all wanted the opposition to win this time. However, as human rights defenders, we are independent and we understand that once a bad law is on the statute books, very, very often, no government wants to repeal it. And that's the real danger of this law. I don't know if many of you had the privilege to listen to Mr. Parakala Prabhakar. He was in Kerala sometime recently. I don't know, his videos are available on the YouTube. He spoke extensively on the subject. I will touch on it briefly. I'll be leaving this copy with Advocate Chandrasekhar. For many of us who are involved as citizens in the voting awareness program, voting registration program, we watched this election very, very closely, and we watched the conduct of the Election Commission quite closely. And on several counts, we found that the conduct of the Election Commission is very, very wanting. Now, why is it wanting? I mentioned initially, and I'll repeat, that the manner of appointment of the Election Commission itself, not statutory or independent anymore, it has become a tool of the union government. A very well-known right to information activist has written a piece today in the Deccan Herald, Venkatesh Nayak. He did a series of right to RTIs to the Election Commission, asking them, please provide me with a list of returning officers all over the country. Now, every booth has a returning officer. The answer he got was, Election Commission does not have the list. The question we are asking is that the Election Commission does not know who the returning officers are. Who conducted the election? Who conducted the election? As citizens, we have a right to know. I think all of us are aware that Article 324 to 328, 324, 25, 26, that grants us the right, universal right to franchise, adult franchise, and grants the power of the Election Commission to conduct elections, gives the election unique plenary power under the Constitution. It can take any steps that is required, any steps that are required to ensure a free and fair election. I'd like to state quite clearly that on several counts, the Election Commission has failed. On several counts. It did not act on grave violations of the Model Code of Conduct, particularly by the star campaigner of the ruling party. The Human Rights Watch has recently brought out a report saying that 110 hate speeches were delivered by the Prime Minister. After the second phase of election, no, before the second phase, after the first phase was over, when I think they saw the way elections were going, I think on April 21st or 22nd in Banswara, Rajasthan, disgusting speech was made by somebody who holds a constitutional position. And after that, it only got worse. Not just the star campaigner who's the Prime Minister, but the Home Minister, functionaries in Madhya Pradesh, in Uttar Pradesh, were openly making speeches that violate the Model Code of Conduct. Several complaints were filed against them. No action has been taken on any of them. That's one. Second, rather, first was returning officers. Third is, under the election conduct rules and the manual of 1961 and 2019 and 2023, it is the legal statutory duty of the Election Commission to provide Form 17A and 17C Part 1 to the candidates. It has not done so. Now, what is 17C? It is the only proof we have, the candidate has, of how many votes were cast in every booth. Now, if I want to make sure as a citizen that my vote which I cast is the same vote that is counted, then I have to have a reassurance from the Election Commission that 17A and 17C forms are with them and they tally with the figures that they have given out. Instead of that, we saw that during this election, no press conference was held by the Election Commission. And experts argue, it's a matter of debate. On 19th of July, several citizens' organizations have sent a notice to the Election Commission asking for explanations. If the explanations are wrong, if the theory is wrong, please explain. But you can't not answer the questions because your first and primary duty of the Election Commission is to the people of India. Not only did it not hold press conferences, in all the 7 phases of polls, it did not release actual figures of the votes polled. It only released percentages. And it did not release any figures for phase 2 at all. And in some cases, they released these figures 2 days later, 5 days later, 11 days later. And what happens between the first day figures that they release and the second figures they release, there was a huge difference. There was a huge difference. So this means that there is an issue that needs questioning, and citizens have a right to ask that question. This report and the report of the ADR is an attempt to raise those questions. It could be some of the interpretations are not correct, because we don't have all the information which the Election Commission is not giving us. But then the Election Commission should provide the information and allay all doubts of the citizen. Because the shocking situation today is that 28% of Indians only have faith in the Election Commission. The rest of the people do not. And that's not a good and healthy place for a democracy. That's the situation. Independent survey by CSDS tells us that only 28% of Indians have faith in the Election Commission. There are many complex issues related to this, including the VVPAT system, the failure of the Election Commission to adhere to basic norms, EVM machines, the code, the batteries, many, many issues. I just urge all of you to look at that as independent citizens and have a look at these reports and make up your own minds. I'd like to then conclude by making 3 or 4 points. You know, the last 10 years of this regime has seen an attack by the government of India on all sections of its people, on Adivasis, on Dalits, on workers, on farmers. Primarily and most brutally, the scapegoats have been the Muslim minority and the Christian minority and the Dalits. Crimes against women have gone up. Not just the Calcutta ghastly rape, but also Darbhanga and Muzaffarpur in Bihar, same time as Kolkata, where a Dalit minor girl was brutally killed after being raped. It has not made the news, it has not brought out the middle class in protest, but it is as problematic as what happened in Bengal. These kind of attacks on citizens, one structural and the other physical and hate-driven, seriously threaten the social fabric of this country. And therefore, I'd like to end by saying that after the election results, there have been at least a dozen very, very brutal lynchings of the Muslim minority. It's almost as if this regime is telling the Muslims that if you get together and exercise your constitutional right to vote, then we will teach you a lesson. Friends, we need to raise our voice against so many of these violations, but we also need to develop an understanding of where all these violations are happening and how they're happening. Thank you so, so much for your patience.
Thank you, ma'am, for your address. May I quickly now call upon Professor K.P. Shankaran, sir, to make a comment on it. Please, sir.
Teesta ji and friends, 2014 to 2024, what all the BJP RSS government or the Modi Shah government did to this country, you heard all sort of atrocities committed by them. Fortunately, 2024 election, they couldn't get that brute majority. That perhaps saved us for another 5 years, and we don't know what will happen after that. And their whole policy is revolve around actually one book. For my understanding, that is Gold Workers' Bunch of Thoughts. I'm sure that many of you would have read Gold Workers' Bunch of Thought. This government is actually functioning. That is actually the government's rule book. Most of the things she said about what they did, you can actually see in this government, in this book. For example, the Indian Constitution is actually not a federal constitution. It is not a fully federal, but it has, you lawyers already know that. It has a federal structure. And the past 2014 to 2024, this government was trying to completely destroy that. Now we know the non-BJP government, BJP states, the BJP supporting governors are the tools they use to destroy the federal structure. You can see that in Kerala. You have seen that in Bengal. The governor who was destroying the structure, the federal structure of India, particularly in Bengal, he has become the Rajya Sabha chairperson. And you have seen the way that person behave or misbehave. So one of the things I would like to, I can't add anything what she said. Only one thing I asked her while we were coming from the airport, what we can do politically. Is there a possibility to organize masses against this group of people? Election, we don't know actually, what will happen after 5 years. Unless these political parties are seriously coming together without fighting each other and taking on this government and propagating the anti-Hindutva ideas among the people, then perhaps there is a chance. I am not denying that. But we have seen what happened in Thrissur. There's a BJP man, a lot of people told me that he was actually doing very good work there. That is not the idea. A person can do very good work, but his ideology, he is supporting a group of people who are doing harm to everybody else. That kind of how do you stop it? That's a question each one of us ask after hearing what she said. This is, to my mind, this is a serious issue. It is not a question. See, now I move around and speak to people, and what I gather, the Malayali Hindu middle class. My parents were part of Hindu religion. And this Hindu middle class has developed an intense Islamophobia, which is something new. Which is something new. The Hindu middle class, I'm talking largely about upper Hindu middle class people like us. There is a visible Islamophobia. And that Islamophobia appeared only after 2014. This RSS BJP propaganda, that's one. And when they came to power, this particular class of people start believing that Muslims are actually a threat to this country. If you want to see that, you actually have to read Goldwalker's book. There is a whole one chapter which says that there are three enemies: Muslims, Christians, and communists. And if you read that book again, you will also see that all what after 2014 that you have been hearing, that love jihad. This book actually didn't use the term. The book actually refers to Muslim men tempting Hindu girls and marrying them. That book carries these ideas. So, without looking at these texts produced by BJP RSS, we cannot actually see what these guys are planning. These guys are planning to eliminate the minority. If minority don't want to get eliminated, then they should accept the Hindu majority's wishes. So there is a need to rethink about our idea of, I'm referring to Hindus now, our idea of Hinduism. Mahatma Gandhi, for example, thought there is a need to ground the Hinduism of his time in ethics. So there is a need to revive that Gandhi's idea that all religions should be grounded in ethics. If we don't get it grounded in ethics, each one of us, the so-called religious believers, they would ended up hating each other. So there is a need to reconsider our thoughts about religion. That's the thing BJP RSS is using to corrupt, to destroy the harmony. That harmony itself is very flimsy and it can be easily broken. And past 10 years, they managed successfully to generate a huge Hindu vote bank. But 2014, fortunately, Dalit moved away from them. That's one good thing happened. And you heard Teesta ji what she said, and reconsider reorganize our thoughts and trying to get rid of Modi-Shah government and their ideology. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As we quickly wind up, may I now invite Advocate Johnson, P. John, to kindly render the vote of thanks.
All respected in the audience and the dais. I don't want to take much time to thank in an elaborate manner. I just plunge into my duty. We met Madam Teesta Setalvad in Bangalore on last year, September 30th, when Eddalu Kannada was convening a very large conference in preparation for the elections to the last Lok Sabha elections. And we invited her to our meeting in Town Hall, which we held it in October 21st. But due to other preoccupations, and the dates could not be adjusted with those convenient dates of Tushar Gandhi and others, she could not attend the meeting at that time. Anyhow, we are very proud of bringing Teesta Setalvad to this function, because this is an appropriate time, and Teesta Setalvad has done in a very wonderful manner the fate and the destiny of our republic, and what may happen if we are not aware of the present situation. Actually, our people are very happy after the elections, because people think that we could bring the Modi government to their control. But we are afraid that a controlled Modi will be more dangerous than a uncontrolled Modi. And with that thinking in our mind, because people will be very complacent. And in the speech itself, that is very evident, because the opposition did not expect this result even. They fought. And they fought in despair, but people gave them the reward. I'm not elaborating. We have been given a very fine evening, a very thought-provoking, very informative, and very enlightened evening today. And we are very much indebted to Srimati Teesta Setalvad for giving this time to us in spite of her sickness and everything. I thank her to our utmost sincerity to give us a very blessing day today. And Professor K.P. Shankaran has been with us for a long time. I didn't think Professor Shankaran will give such a long comment, and it was very thought-giving, very informative, and that it was a good message was also given in that meeting. Usually, Professor K.P. Shankaran is very reluctant to talk, and when he talks, he gives only a few words. But today he has given a very good speech also. And we are very much grateful to Professor K.P. Shankaran. And Sri T. Ahmed Kabir, MLA, former MLA, he has been guiding us for the last more than 1 year. And in spite of his personal problems, physical problems out of illness and all that, he has been working with us as a full-time worker and a continuous support he is giving to us, and we give him a special thanks on this occasion. We have got very senior members from the public. V.M.K. Raman ji was there, Salam sir was there, and also many senior advocates like Sri N.D. Premachandran, Jalil, Advocate P.K. Babakar, and many others. I'm not mentioning everyone. And for the sake of formality, I also thank Sri P. Chandrasekhar, our chairman, and General Convener, Dr. K. Radhakrishnan Nair. And our treasurer, Sri C. Paulus, was here. He has left the meeting earlier. And I thank everyone who has attended this meeting. Once more, I thank all.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Thank you, ma'am, once again, and all of you. We wish you a good evening.